Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the MHP Show podcast. We talk about mobile home parks, trailer parks, everything that's crazy and interesting associated with this niche asset class. I have another very special guest with me today. I have Mr. Pasha Esfandiary. Did I mess it up?
No, you said it
It's
right. You said
fine.
it perfect.
Man, as I told you before, I didn't want to Virginiafy it because that's what happens when you're from the sticks. You like pronounce things differently,
Little
man. So
differently.
Pasha is with his company's Evoke Capital. They've got about 2,100 mobile home, 2,100 lots.
Yep.
Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, man. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah,
Now that you said my last name right, I think we're gonna have a good show.
we're gonna have a good show now. So no, not one word
No,
answers.
no. For anyone who's listening, I threatened him if you messed up my last name that I would just be like a stale person on this and give one word answers the whole time.
Well, that's why I made sure I got it right because, if everyone that came on this show made that kind of proclamation there, I probably would have some shows with one word answers because I think I've butchered some last names. There's no question about it. No question about it.
Yeah, man. We're gonna have fun. This is gonna be great.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, yeah, man. So you're obviously, you're a real estate investor now, ultra successful. I see your stuff on LinkedIn. I love your posts and kind of your
Thanks,
your
man.
mentality around things and just life mentality from the things I've learned about you since we were like leading up to this show. So we'll
Sweet.
get into some of that stuff, but I think more interestingly is your background and what you did before
Yeah.
you got into mobile home park investing. So I'd really like to dive into that a little bit. So tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, we can talk about the first job I had was giving massages to at a tele company, but no, I think you're referring obviously to the poker background, right? So
Yeah.
when I was younger, one thing that I knew for a fact was that school wasn't for me, right? And you have to understand my past before that was I didn't grow up, unfortunately, say as a happy kid. I was very depressed and things happened and that's okay, whatever. I worked through it. And honestly, I'm the most grateful for that period now. But you have to understand, I made a commitment to myself that I would never do anything I didn't want to do. Right. So that's my baseline. Okay. And once I got out of high school, which I was forced to do, and I got to college and I said, this is voluntary. And I hated it. I hated it. I hated how slow it was. I hated how slow high school was. Um, I am someone who can learn very quickly and I can understand concepts and I want to move on faster and faster. And that's not really the way classroom settings are designed. Right. And so after the second semester, essentially after the first week, I just dropped out and I just said, I can't do this and I'll find my own way. I always knew that I wanted to be incredibly successful. I always had this intense fire inside of me. And I just said, this wasn't the route. This is slowing me down. And so I said that, and I said that without a plan. So, but I always had good work ethic, and my dad instilled that into me, being an immigrant family. And so I got, odd jobs here and there. But what happened was that in 2004, my brother, if anyone knows pokers, Antonio Esfandiary, the magician, and happened to win the biggest poker prize ever in a tournament. But also, I said, well, if he could do it, I could do it. It's like that competition, right? Like, I know how
Sure.
smart he is, and I know how smart I am. And so I started getting into poker when I was young, and I never really did it thinking I was going to be a poker player, but I was making good money from it. And I was being a waiter, and I had, I managed an internet gaming center. But I always made auxiliary money on the side from it, playing when I was, 18, 19, 20, right? And then it really all came to a head one time when I was in Las Vegas. My brother's like, hey, go play some cards. I said, no, I don't want to. And it was like the World Series of Poker, I believe in 2014. I might butcher the year by one year on either side. But and I took like my little money that I had and I ended up turning about $1,000 into close to over $20,000 within 2 weeks. And I played the main event and I won my way in and all that. And I said, okay, there's something here. Let me really study this. And And that's how I got into it. And I picked up pretty quickly. I was very aggressive on the poker table, and everyone back then just didn't know how to spell poker. So that's how it started.
That's awesome, man. And that's, it's so fascinating to me. I used to play some poker, like, kind of in my late teens and early 20s, with the boys on Friday, and we would
Yeah,
play. And I used to
that's the
watch the World
best.
Series of Poker a little bit. So that's I love that, man. And
Thanks.
it's interesting, like, I'm just curious, like, what is the skill that makes, like, someone good at the professional level?
The first thing that will always come into my to be incredibly good, to be the 1% of poker players, is you have to adapt quicker than everybody else. You have to pick up on the clues that people are giving and adapt your style of play to the other player who's adapting to you quicker. Okay, that is like really encapsulates the number one trait. But to be a good poker player, and let's define what a good poker player means. A good poker player means that you are a winning poker player. Okay. A winning poker player, if we're going to define that, that is patience, that is discipline, and that is knowing strategy and how to have good game selection. Game selection just meaning, what game are you playing? What are the stakes you're playing? Are the players worse than you? And are you being able to beat that game on a regular basis?
Mm.
So that is game selection.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. From like an outsider looking in, it's always like, how this guy's a professional poker player. Like, what is the skill set that's behind that? Because if I
Yeah.
go somewhere now and I'm gambling now, which I don't do a lot of, by the way, I'm just like, okay, I got to make this interesting. So I'm going to take something out. I'm going to put it all in red. Hit. If I do it again, I'm going to put it all in red again.
Well,
I'm that guy. I'd like all or nothing.
yeah. See, I can't do that. I've just been trained to never give edge away. So I can't, even though I know, because in roulette, I forget how there's like 30 numbers or something. And then
Yeah.
there's the two green ones. And those
Right.
two green numbers give massive edge to the house.
They do.
So you're just at a massive disadvantage. I just could never be that guy. It just wasn't ingrained in me. I could never give edge away in table games like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
do love putting the only times that I would do this, I love putting people to the test. Like if I'm on the poker table, I would rather go to the poker table and play for about 15 minutes and just try to find the most conservative player there and just purposely try to bluff them. And if I on low stakes and just to show them bluff and then walk away like that. I've done that many times in a casino, which has been fun.
How is that? I'm curious, is like, how has that translated into your business success? Like the skills that you learned from that, like, has it? And then what skills do you think translate to business?
Like, I always love when people ask this because when I got into like business, who was going to take me seriously? I don't have a college background. I was a poker player, right? So I was professional at taking other people's money, but it translates in so many ways. The basis of being a good poker player is that you're always self-evaluating and always having to get better.
Mm.
To be a good poker player, you have to study immensely. You have to run simulations all the time. You have to constantly evaluate your state of mind. You have to evaluate how you play cards. You have to evaluate how other people are playing patterns, and you're trying to decipher information from an incomplete information game, which is
Mm.
awesome because it trains your mind to look for clues everywhere, right? So this helps me a lot in negotiations, like quite a bit. This helps me have that foundation of I always have to study, study, study. Secondly, in poker, you have to make what is the right move for the plus EV play, which is expected value. And so what I mean by that is that if let's say you and I are playing a pot together and I'm a 55% favorite to win the hand,
Hmm.
I have to put my money in, right? That 10% difference, because you're at 45, I'm at 55, is massive.
Mm.
And so it's massive only in the sense that, yes, in the short run, you might hit 3 of those 45%, but whatever, because if I do that 100 times, I'm going to be a net winner, right? So it
Mm.
teaches you to always think long term and to make the right decision for the future, right? And that's how I've built my real estate portfolio. That's how I built my company. Everything is future based, and
Mm.
uh, it will actually diminish your short term variance if you have a longer view and a longer horizon, right? And then, another thing I talk about on this is called game selection. I think is so massively important. Game selection just being, what game do you want to play? I picked mobile home parks because I think when you evaluate all of the real estate sectors, I think for mobile home parks hit the things that I innately wanted more of: better cash flows, more consistency, higher depreciation, and it's more fragmented, which means
Yep.
more opportunity, and there's more of a stigma, which means more opportunity. So the competition isn't as high as I would say, obviously multifamily or other sectors of like triple net. And so that to me was uh, just simulating my poker career, right? I just found better games. I wasn't the best poker player. I just found better games to play at.
Mm, yeah, I love that, man. And that's, a couple things you said there that resonated with me. And, like being long term oriented and thinking long term and thinking in futures and thinking 5 or 10 years down the road. I mean, you have to be sort of to do real estate syndications and funds. You have to be like long term oriented because you don't make a bunch of money up front,
No.
right? You're making your hit on the back end for performing well for your company and your investors.
Yeah,
And
we hope.
so, what's
Not
that?
all operators are like that, but we hope, the good ones, in my opinion, are stacked that way.
Right, right. And you have, like, in my opinion, I just don't see, you can't build a sustainable business because at some point it's going to come out, right?
So I love that you say that, and it's kind of coming out right now, right? If
Mm,
you're involved in real estate syndications, you're an active LP investor and you're part of investment groups, you're going to notice that there's a lot of capital calls that are happening in multifamily, and there's a lot of people that are getting washed with the tides because they weren't great on their pro forma or diligent or conservative. And so it happens. And in poker, I would always just remember that everyone's true color eventually comes out. One
mm,
thing that you learn in poker is you see what games people are playing. You see what facade they're trying to put at the poker table, but you really have to identify their patterns. And I've noticed that a lot in, unfortunately, in some of the sectors that as an LP investor, who are the bad actors, who are the actors who are getting ahead of themselves. And it's all showing right now. With time, true character always gets revealed.
yeah, yeah, that's true. And I think, well, we're going to see more of that coming out here in the next few years, but which gives guys like you and I some opportunity to
I
go
love it.
in and potentially snag some stuff.
That's what we're seeing right now. I don't know what you guys are seeing, but we're seeing the majority of the deals that are almost passing our desk and passing our criteria are from operators who purchased mobile home parks 3-4 years ago, and their
Hmm.
debt is becoming due. And
Yeah,
they probably built some equity into there, but
sure.
they're not optimizing, right? And as you know, inside the sector, it is so nuanced, and you have to be a great operator to be able
Yeah,
to hit your numbers. And if you can, then it's a wonderful sector to be in. But that's the thing. It's so nuanced. It is a lot harder than most people think. People just see the numbers and they get attracted to that, and they skimp out on their operations, which I think is a massive error. But that's also what I'm excited about for this opportunity coming our way.
yeah. I mean, what I learned coming into this business, unfortunately, is like, I had to learn the hard way, right? I'd like, okay, man, this isn't a passive investment. It's not mailbox money.
No,
Right? How many times have you heard that? It's not a
yeah,
passive investment. It's not mailbox money. Now, as more your assets, the more they season, yes, the more passive they
yeah,
are, for sure. But it takes work to get them there because of the fragmentation that you talked about.
yeah.
And it just takes time. It just takes time to get to that passive part. Did you have any like preconceptions on the industry that were sort of shattered before you, like, when you
Yeah,
got into your
of
first park?
course. I the only reason why I got into mobile home parks is my my partners essentially forced me to buy a mobile home park with them. And these guys are smart as hell. I mean, if we think that Evoke Capital is doing well, it's because of my partners, not because of me, and by like a long shot. And so I was buying some apartment complexes, and I had them partner up with me, and they underwrote it, and They did all like the due diligence. And I said, man, these guys are awesome. Because I was coming from development of residential into here, and I studied it for years. I knew how to underwrite, but I said, hey, this is my first few deals. I need you to overlook my shoulder, just make sure I make no mistakes.
Right.
These guys were awesome. And then they came into some of the deals I happened to find that were really great. And they're like, Pasha, we're going to buy this mobile home park, and it's amazing. And I think you should come in with us. And so they were putting their money into it. And I had done some research. I knew enough about mobile home parks, being in real estate for so long as I have. But I told them time and time again, I said, I just don't understand how these numbers work. Like, I don't get it. And they essentially at one point just said, Pasha, just trust us. Like, we know what we're doing. So then I trusted them. And that one property performed better than any of my apartment complexes. And I thought I got a steal on the apartment complexes. And then the thing that surprised me the most was the demand we had to get into the park. We put a tester ad in. We were just inundated. And I just said, whoa. Plus I did like the market trend. Obviously, I love thinking, like we talked about, like long-term horizons. And I know that there's no good low-income housing solution at this point. And I looked into developing LIHTC as my next kind of career choice. And so I fused all of that, their expertise and market trends and the demand. And so we went with it. But
yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah. I mean, it was always interesting for me. I had understood, I actually learned how to underwriting multifamily because I wanted to get into that business.
Yeah.
But then the same thing with you, when I started seeing the returns from parks, I was like, oh,
yeah,
like,
we're yield chasers. We see higher yield. We're like, ooh, all right, let's go explore this. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, it's like, obviously I look at, hey, how much work is involved? Is the yield worth the work? It has to be. The juice has to be worth the squeeze. Or I can buy something that's less work, and the yield will be a little bit higher.
Yeah.
But what I found in the beginning is these value add mobile home parks were just, yes, you could go in and roll your sleeves up, and I was actually ready to do that. In the beginning, I'm like, dude, I don't care. I just want to get in the business, right?
Yeah.
And so you
Yeah,
just
I
freaking
get it.
you go in after anything. But now I'm like, okay, maybe we can go after something that puts less gray hair on my head.
It's true. I don't know if you can see my gray hair, but it's there. Oh yeah. So you and I are in the same boat. It's interesting. We typically I know there's a lot of operators and great operators out there in the mobile home park communities space, and they go after big infills. But that is one of the hardest components of this business. And so we have a ratio of, we don't allow 15% of our parks in aggregate to have an infill play. And so because, as we're building out our sales department, we have, 5 dedicated teammates to just sales department now, but still we're trying to, organically grow into the number that we can sell before we take on huge value adds. Right. So it's tough. It's the demand is there, but it's tough to get tenants across the finish line.
Yeah. Cause you gotta, they gotta pass your background check, which is, can be tough.
Mm-hmm.
You said you had 5 people. They're just doing home sales for you guys?
Yeah, so we have one regional salesman. We just added a national sales director. We have one person just posting ads, and we have one person doing all the applications for 21st in a certain area, and we have another person just doing 21st applications.
Okay. Okay. So you guys are you're bringing in brand new homes.
So yes, we still bring in some used homes. I think when we first started, we were only bringing in used homes, and now we're bringing in new homes. That's correct.
Got it. And what markets are you guys buying in?
I mean, so we're in 10 different states. We'll buy really anywhere that's a red state. But where we have most of our portfolios will be Georgia, Texas, and Alabama. And those are the 3 markets that we like the most.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I like, I like bigger markets as well, just because of the demand. Like I love when we do a test ad somewhere, and as you mentioned earlier, that it just goes crazy. It just gives me way more confidence that, hey, we've got a lot of demand here. Things can go wrong,
Mhm.
and we can still survive because of that.
Yeah.
And so I'm huge on larger markets to buy in because I
Yeah.
think there's just so much. Just in my opinion, I think on your exit, I think you're going to obviously get a better exit,
For
but
sure.
through and through, it's just what I would prefer to do.
What's your essentially, I mean, it's always a scale, but what's your kind of population that you're looking for on a minimum?
Well, I mean, a half a
Okay.
million and
Oh, yeah.
up in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
MSA. Um, I think the smallest one that we're in is a half a million. It's like Ocala, Florida,
Yeah.
that MSA. And even then, like if we're doing like we were doing a lot of park owned home conversions. And so even in an MSA of that size, it was still slower than it was in per se Orlando or
Mhm.
Tampa because there's millions of people there and the demand is just, it seems endless.
Yeah, it really is. That's interesting. So we target 50K populations in a month,
Okay.
but our strategy is a little different. We hold forever. So
Yeah.
we want to get in and find these deals that have a ton of meat on the bones, and we'll get in and we'll do a refi after 5 years to get all of our equity back out, and then we'll just keep it cash flowing, and we stabilize it within those 5 years, and then we're just building up our portfolio that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm the same. I guess when I say, exit, stuff I have in Tampa, someone's more likely to come pay an absurd cap
For
rate
sure.
for that. And if that is offered, then hey, it would be dumb for me not to,
Correct.
take that, right?
Yep.
But not that I want to sell. I want to hold these things too, especially good assets. I mean, because as I mentioned earlier, when it seasons, they kind of just sit there.
Yeah.
If there's no problems, they do get. Well, if you got your management system in place, like you know, they can be pretty hands off. So I'm with you on that.
Yep.
Um, so you are. I was looking, and you're a big personal development guy, and I see all the books behind you. And I am too. Like I'm always reading something, I'm always learning. And I know you mentioned when you were playing poker, it was like, hey, you have to constantly be getting better. And so how much is, I see Think and Grow Rich behind you,
Yeah, it's my
you know?
favorite book.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great book. But like how important is that? Because there's some people that I talk to like, oh yeah, I'm not going to read one of those, stupid personal development books. I'm not going to do that. And I'm just like, all right, man, whatever. But
Yeah.
how important do you think that is? You know the guys I'm talking about.
I 100% know the guys you're talking about, and those are not people that are in my sphere in my life long. um, Even though some of my friends just never go. I think it's an interesting question, because I think there are some people who innately have this drive and passion and learning. Everyone learns differently, right? And so I think for me, as long as people are growing in my life and hitting goals and achieving, and learning from their mistakes, I think that's one way to grow. That's a form of personal development, right?
Yeah.
People who stay stagnant, I can't have anything part of. For me, I've always loved learning, but I need to learn something and then I can integrate it very quickly, right? I can
Yeah.
learn a concept very quickly and then I can do it. So, having to raise myself as a child, essentially, I had to learn everything from books. I mean, growing up, I learned everything from books. I,
Mm.
and I was just so, I would say, idiotic or naive, that I wouldn't ask anyone for help when I was younger because I was so stubborn, right? And so I would only read books and I would just devour it. So I think it's really different for everybody, but personal development, I mean, like, why there's so much information out there right now in the age that we live in, that you can have, like, it's already all, mostly every problem that you have, let's say in business, in real estate, personal development, it's all been figured out already.
Yep.
And it's there, the information is there waiting for you just to go search for it, read it, and incorporate it. But a lot of people will read something, and that's the biggest thing, is the integration, right? And so You could read whatever you want. It's great. Good book, fine. But if you don't integrate it, it's not even worth reading. So I always have a rule that I, at least minimum on every book that I read, I have to integrate one thing and make it a practice. Well, at least one. Because the compound effect over 20 years, 40 years, it's insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's massive, but at the same time, I want to give a kudos to those certain individuals that don't have to do it and still achieve their goals and still kind of go through their own learning process.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there is, you can, in my opinion, you can just kind of shortcut various things, because I know myself, when I started reading books and to diving into the personal development world, I started to like learn things about myself. Okay, this is why you do this. This is why you do this. And so I became more aware, and I was able to, on a daily basis, yes, implement something, but also change behaviors, right?
Yep.
Because I was aware of them. And had I not been before, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah. I remember this powerful moment. I was playing poker. This is very early on in my career. I was about 22, I think, and a very successful poker pro I was playing with. We were just chatting and talking and whatever. And he goes, "Man, you have ADD." I was like, "I know. I've been trying to tell this to my dad forever." Like, he's like, "No, you have really bad ADD. I could tell because I have ADD." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "I know that. Thank you." And he goes, "You need to read this book. It's called it was like the 7 different types of ADD and whatever." I ended up reading the book, and I remember type 2 of which one I was reading of ADD. It had me down verbatim. And in adolescence, you go from potentially being a good kid into being this mischievous kid because now you don't have like adrenaline going in your brain anymore because your hormones have changed, and you typically get into this XXS, and your grades will potentially suffer. And it wrote me down to a T. I was getting straight A's until boom, I hit 8th grade, and then I started getting D's and D minuses, and I started just being mischievous and playing games and ditching school and all of these things. And so, and then it also says that you have self-destructing habits, and this hit home so hard because at that time when I was 22, I would play amazing poker, and then I would have one night where I would self-sabotage myself. And it said the reason why you self-sabotage yourself is because you have a lack of adrenaline going to your brain. And so it is easier as a human to fixate on the bad and the negative. And so you get yourself there because now you're lacking this adrenaline rush to your brain that you need. And so you create adrenaline by self-sabotaging. I said, holy crap.
Wow.
It was insane. And that book itself changed my whole career in poker, because up until that point I would do well, and then I would have one night I would blow it. After 3 or 4 times of doing that, you're just like, what the hell is wrong with me? So it's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's interesting. That's interesting. Like what you just said before, because I think at some point, I know of me personally, I was in my early 20s, I was a disaster, self-sabotaging myself. Like, I actually stayed in college. You said you left after a week, and I knew I should have. I just like the partying and the girls and all that too much.
Yeah, that is the experience I missed. The social aspect of college.
Yeah, but you didn't miss anything, dude. It was just I just got bad habits that I had to break. like, I mean, I don't think that there's. I mean, maybe one or two people that I went to college with that I still like speak with, but none of
Right.
the relationships were like, super valuable.
Mhm.
But because I just, I just partied too much. But
Right.
it is
That's
what it is.
I mean, that's I guess the quintessential college experience. I do know that, I don't know why I'm gonna say this, but I'm gonna say this. I was a very late to the puberty game. So, and I didn't hit puberty until I was 18 years old, like basically after I graduated high school. So, it was a very weird time for me. I come out of high school and I start making quite a bit of good money, and I'm still learning how to be a young adult.
Yeah.
And so I'm making a lot of money, but I'm also wanting to go out and have the experiences of going out and getting girls. Cause I mean, up until then I was 5'2" and 185 pounds. Like no one wanted to date me.
Yeah.
And so it was a very interesting time in my life. I wouldn't trade it for the world, but it was very confusing, but also very fun. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
If I would have been, there was probably a reason behind me being broke, like when I first got into college. I mean, if I would have had money then, it would have been bad. Like it would have been bad.
It could get bad. It could get bad. Yeah.
Yeah. It would have gotten bad. So there's probably, a reason. And I think there's, we all go through our own path and we all
Mhm.
have our own like success story. And I think it's interesting because even, I've talked to people that have had, I don't want to say like, a silver spoon upbringing, but to a degree, like they either had money and they were able to start their venture with a little bit of a head start. But even those guys I've talked to that have taken that and actually made it like
Mhm.
extremely big, they still went through trials and tribulations and
You have to.
failures and things.
You
Like,
have to.
yeah.
It's so important. I just had twins, newborns. This is why I'm probably a little tired. My eyes are a
Oh,
little bloodshot, but
congrats, man.
thank you.
Congrats. Yeah.
And so, one thing that I often think about is that, we're, my kids are gonna be privileged. Like I've worked really hard for this, but I come from nothing. And so, how do I create that duality in their mind? Because I have met those silver spooned kids, and that is the farthest thing I want my child to be. But also at the same time, I have developed a finer taste of things, right? Like I like
Sure.
nicer things. And so I just don't want them to think that. And so, that is probably the biggest thing I think about my children right now is about how do I as a parent make sure that they understand that what we have to be very grateful for, right?
Mhm.
And so, and you can the human experience, in my opinion, um, isn't easy. Like
Right.
it was never meant to be easy. And so I am afraid with, and this is just more philosophical, I am afraid about where the culture is going and the conversations around of like, oh, you're not supposed to like hurt their feelings, or you're not supposed to, you know, I say, but that's how you grow,
Yeah.
right? And why don't we just teach the tools for our children or the generations underneath us on how to overcome obstacles and understand that that's going to happen no matter what.
Yeah.
And so why not prepare our kids for the world instead of trying to shelter them from the world? And so,
Mm.
yeah, I went on a little bit of a tangent, but it's top of mind for me right now.
No, yeah, I totally understand. I have two kids as well, 1 and 3. And I worry about thank you. I worry about the same stuff. I mean, it's almost like society wants people to avoid discomfort or anything like, oh no, you can't do that. Like
You
you
can't say
can't tell
this.
someone the truth.
You can't do that. What I'm like, pay. I mean, they're gonna hear it. For me, and you should always 100% respect everybody. But I think it's being so watered down. And I live in Los Angeles, so the things that
Oh,
people,
well.
yeah. So it's kind of tough.
I was there. I was there back in September,
Mhm.
and I stayed downtown, and
Oh Jesus,
it was so fascinating to me
downtown,
because
worst
on the
part.
one side of the hotel, I stayed in a nice hotel, like wasn't crappy hotel. One side of the hotel, it's like, ugh,
Mhm.
and tent city, and then on the other side, I'm like, man, this is like pretty nice, like it's pretty
That's
nice.
that's the insane thing about California is that you get used to it. You get used to the homeless, right? And like I have nothing against homeless, but at the same time, now that I have children, it means a lot more because there are some that, just like with every kind of amount of numbers and there's so many homeless here, that you have some of the bad apples who are constantly cracked out, who are angry and trying to
Yeah,
throw things at your car. And it's very rare, comparatively speaking, on how many we see, because there's been plenty of times where we give our food away to the homeless and whatnot, and they're so appreciative and they're so cool. Like
yeah,
they're generally like just great people, but there are bad actors, and so like I do fear for like the safety. But yeah, California's messed up. It's
yeah.
very
Yeah, and I mean, I think I posted a video the other day about a crazy. It was a reel on Instagram about a crazy story on a park that we bought. And basically, there was a bunch of vacant houses, and the prior manager, who would smoke meth in the park office and whatever else, would basically rent out the vacant homes to homeless people that were shooting up in there, having sex. And I posted about this is like crazy stuff. And some person commented on it, this big long lecture, like, oh, well, maybe you, instead of getting the homeless people out of there, you could have, turned it into a public facility and given them shelter. And like, I'm like, dude,
Is you
like,
know,
you have kids? If you live there, like,
yeah, you don't want them there.
no.
I mean, that whole thing. I think there are some things that are based outside of logic,
For sure.
and some of the laws that are being created in California are decriminalizing, which I actually understand the intent of it, because I do think there's too many incarcerated people into jail for things that aren't like nonviolent, and just I think it's ludicrous and ridiculous. And obviously, there's certain just people who are targeted more on that, and it's not okay, like in any way, shape, or form. But then it's also, they went too far on the spectrum of like decriminalizing like theft, like, and
Yeah.
so now the cause of it is that there's a lot more theft around. And even in my neighborhood, right, like, I started seeing cops in my neighborhood patrolling. I'm like, is anything going on? They're like, no, we're just patrolling. I'm like, I've never seen that before. So it is scary when you have children, that things that need to be protected. um yeah, but that's crazy about your story about the mobile home parks. Like, I mean, what about the other tenants?
Yeah.
Like what
The other
about their
tenants
safety?
with
Yeah.
kids in there.
Doing crack, or who God knows what. It's like,
Yeah.
why? And then what if they have the gun or shoot it? You just don't know. Like, you don't want that liability. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. It's crazy, but I think it's kind of, unfortunately, it's indicative of kind of the mentality that is coming into the society, unfortunately. And because I'll get comments on stuff all the time like that.
It,
Like, oh, evil landlord, stuff like that. I'm like, oh my gosh, like you should have seen this freaking park before we came in here. Like,
they don't get it. They,
yeah,
and that's what I've chalked it up to, because I'm not trying to get into anything political, but I've been, being in California, there's a ton of very extreme leftists, right?
yeah,
And so when they talk to me about like what I do and the way I should be running my business and how I should be running my business, I was like, you have no idea what you're talking about. I have taken all the risk. I have employed over 25 people. I take all of the liabilities. And you think I should be doing this way? Why don't you go create a business? Why don't you
yeah,
go create jobs? And then when you notice how hard it is to create a business in the first place, and then you think that you're saying these things should happen just because I have a business, you just assume that I could do all of these things out of the goodness of my heart. It's like, well, I have to keep the business afloat. So it's pretty difficult. I think the naiveness and that's the thing, is like, no one educates themselves on it. And so there's been plenty of times when I'm in a conversation, I say, how much have you actually educated yourself on this topic before we get into this?
I like that
Did,
one.
did you just only see this on Instagram and TikTok? And if so, let's not have a conversation on this, because I promise you I'm way more educated on this and I have way more experience than you. So have you studied anything? What's the last thing you like researched on this on? And it's usually nothing. It's
No.
zero. So I just try to save my like life units and energy on that.
That's good, man. I love that. You need to type that up in a script for me. That's a mic drop script right there. Because you're right, most people just regurgitate sort of what they hear.
Right. It's confirmation bias. Right.
It's
And
like,
so
you want me to adjust and you think that I can do all this stuff, like, yeah, you're right, I'm hiring people. I'm signing, I'm guaranteeing the loans that we're doing,
yeah,
right?
same.
Like these people, I think, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. Oh, wait, this is really hard being a business owner because I get paid last.
Yep, that's correct.
I get paid last. Like,
everyone eats before us.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And if there's something that has to be, I guess sacrificed or something, or there has to be something, like you're the one that forfeits the income to solve that problem.
Yeah.
And
I know, unfortunately. All too well.
unfortunately. Yeah, unfortunately. I've been there too.
Yeah.
And but I think for guys like us, and it's like, sometimes I don't know. I just like the challenge. I like the game. The game is fun to me. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what I would do. Like, what would I do?
We have to. I think anyone who has, a type A personality or driven, we have to do something.
Yeah.
Just always and forever.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to work in a grocery store.
Hmm.
I was stock shelves. I was
I
the
bet you were
master
good at it too.
at stocking shelves. I
Yeah.
tried to do it as fast as I freaking could to get the hell out of there every night. And I just, I think about that stuff, and always I worked and took pride in what I did, but I don't know. I try to think back of okay, how you go get a paycheck every 2 weeks for this amount. And I'm like, okay, I'd rather go through the turmoil, the stress, the whatever.
It's true. Me too. I think it's just really important. I think, even though I essentially work 9 to 5, I'm able to leave a little early because I'm, the founder, and I can go be with my kids that we have to go to our 6 month, check-in. There's a lot of things that I get to go be at. And I think that's the most important thing for me, is have that freedom. I wouldn't change it for the world. I like the stress that comes with it. And I like achieving. I like what business makes you become when you have a goal and a vision that's bigger than yourself, and you have responsibility. Now I have an organization that is relying on myself and my partners to get better and do better. It forces you to be better and do better. And I love that about business. It
Yeah.
forces you to get better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's awesome. What do you, because I'd be curious, you got 2 kids now.
Hmm.
So they're both 6 months. I know how that is. Trust me. I can't imagine 2 at the same time.
Yep.
But how do you still accomplish everything that you need to during the day in the business? Obviously, you spend time with the kids. The wife. Like, what do you do, and what's your hack to maximizing all those areas?
I mean, it's very simple. It boils down to one thing: is delegation.
Yeah.
I would say that I'm a master delegator. I've structured my life to have everything delegated. And I think that's a beautiful thing about entrepreneurship, is that, you can have a problem and you have to solve it somehow. And so,
Yep.
but the way I look at problems, probably because of my upbringing and the way I was and what I've been through, I always start with my lifestyle first, because I know how important lifestyle is. I know how important happiness and joy is. So I start with anything that I'm creating or anything that I want to achieve. I start with my lifestyle first. And so I have the goal, and then I say, well, what kind of lifestyle do I want to have with it? And then with the end in mind, I work myself backwards. How do I achieve that? How do I keep scaling the way that my mind wants to scale at, while also protecting what is the most important thing at the end of the day? No matter what, like, all this success and money doesn't mean anything or hold a candle to my kids and my wife and my family. And so just having that reminder to myself of what is the most important. I journal every single day. What are my goals? I journal all my goals, even my relationship goals, what kind of dad I want to be. So just a constant reminder of that. But it's delegation. And what I will say for anyone who's listening, and I've it's like, this is like verbatim, happens time and time and time again, is I push a lot of my friends to hire an EA or a right-hand man or woman, um, sooner than you think, because there's so many people out there that want to learn from you, have that mentorship, but also your time is the most valuable. So I protect my time more than, I would say, a lot of peers that I do know. And anytime that anyone's ever hired an EA or a right-hand man or woman, they have been like, wow, I wish I did this sooner. And I promise you, I wish I hired mine sooner as well too. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like the same thing with me. And every time that we're like, okay, we need to bring on this staff member to do this, I'm always like, I got to bust through this limiting belief. I'm like, do we want to spend the money? And I'm always like, yes, we do, because, looking towards the future, and it's going to give me more time back and whoever time back and make the operation run more efficiently. Yes, it's going to cost more money, but in the long run, as you said, you're getting your time back, and that's the most valuable thing for sure.
One of my favorite cheeky slogans I like to say as a joke, but happiness is expensive sometimes. And so, yeah, we don't want to spend the money. I don't want to have the extra payroll on there, but man, my happiness is way more important. So, you don't have to take a slogan like verbatim on it, but just understand that being in the positions that we're in, we need to spend our resources on the things that are important. And I think a lot of people confuse it, at least for what I believe to be the most important is my health, my family, and my time
Absolutely.
with my kids. Right. So my dad didn't have the opportunity once we migrated here as a single father to spend time with me and my brother. So I understand how important it is to spend time with children. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. Happiness is expensive.
yeah.
So like Rolexes, happiness is expensive, man.
You should start saying that to your wife when you want like a new watch or something. Like, hey, babe, happiness is expensive.
No, I will not tell her that because then she'll be like, hey, there's this new purse I want.
Yeah,
Happiness
exactly.
is
It will
expensive.
come back. It will come back
It
to
will
you.
come back. Well, hey, Pasha, dude, I've enjoyed our conversation. I think we
Same.
could probably go back and forth here for a bit. Anything else that you want to leave our listeners with before we head out here?
I don't know. I think I've substantially bored your probably listeners enough, and we don't even really talk much about mobile home parks and went off on our own tangents. No, I really don't. Other than, man, I just hope if anyone's listening, if you have a goal, just get after it. And there is, I think the biggest thing is that I think too many people, it's called loss aversion, right? And too many people are focused on what can happen and go wrong. If you let's say your listeners are wanting to get into the mobile home park space. Most people think about the risk instead of the reward. And they think about the risk and they magnify the risk. Let me give you an example. Okay. Man, if I do this, I lose all of my savings, and then I'll lose my home, and then I'll lose all of these things. And it just goes on this super negative spiral to the 10th degree, but that's not really what's going to happen. I think at the end of the day, no matter what happens, and you're most likely going to have enough family, friends, or whatever to have a roof always over your head. If you take a risk, you're always going to have food on your plate. There's always going to be love in your life, right? So at the end of the day, and then you can always pick yourself back up. If you lose it, if you leave a W-2 that you've been in a career for 10, 15 years, and then you leave for about a year or two, doesn't mean you can't go get another job in another, in those 1 or 2 break after, if you were to fail. I think people magnify the failure to being this catastrophic thing, where it's really not. When you zoom out big picture, it's really not. And so I hope that can help people make a logical and educated decision to take risk and to go after their goals.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, man. And even me, I've become accustomed to hey, I can actually take this risk and go, but that still happens to me. I still magnify the shit that can happen. I'm like, all right, we're going to do it anyways. But I've gotten good at that. I've gotten good at just doing it anyways. If I feel good about it, just doing it anyways. It's a muscle.
Like a muscle.
Yeah.
You just got to do it. Right.
Yeah.
So there's been plenty of times in my life, in my career, I'm like, shit, all right, I got to do this. All right, I don't want to, but I have to. This is the next step. I'm living in my vision. I have to do it. And so you do it, and then you just gain some experience. And you're like, oh, all right, that wasn't so bad.
Yeah. You know what helped me build that muscle? It was this and a Yellow Pages phone book that I used to cold call businesses about. I had to do it anyway every freaking day.
Right.
It was like,
yeah, that's a good skill to have, to get rejection early on in your career. I think I would love to. I mean, I don't know what my kids are going to decide to do. If I can get them into a position where they get rejected very early on in their career, some of the most successful people that I've ever met are okay with rejection.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's a powerful trait. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was watching something. I saw a clip of something. I forget who it was. Dan Pena. You know who he is? Wild ass guy.
No, I don't know who he is.
Anyways, he was talking about super successful people. The dude's funny. He's like pretty absurd, to be honest with you, but he's funny. But he made a good point, and this sort of resonated with me. He was like, this is exactly what he said. He said, do you think Elon Musk gives a fuck about anything that anybody thinks about him?
Yeah.
No, he doesn't.
No.
I'm like,
None,
oh,
zero.
like, just take the action, man.
Yeah, we again, we magnify what other people think when in reality, most people don't really care.
They don't care.
They might make a comment, but they're going to live their lives. So that's so it's so powerful because when you really boil it down, you have to understand that humans are very selfish in nature, and humans are very self-involved. And when you get to that baseline, you say, "Oh, it doesn't really matter. Like, if I do something and I fail, and what if I don't care what people think of me? So whatever."
Yeah. Well, hey, again, Pasha, I think thank you for coming on. Where can people find you?
You can go to my website, evocapital.net, or you can just email me at pasha@evocapital.net.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for watching the MHP show. We will be back every week with another show. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you all next week. Peace.
Thank you.